Frailty is a Southern Gothic thriller.
It's a story of two generations of serial killers.
You have a father who is getting messages from God to tell him to get rid of all of the bad people on earth.
G-O-D, telling him this is exactly what you're supposed to do. These are the names, go take care of them.
But of course the kicker is that the demons look just like ordinary people.
There are demons among us.
Coming up on Anatomy of a Scene, filmmaker Bill Paxton and his production team dissect a pivotal scene from his directing debut, Frailty.
There's a lot of subtext in that scene that has to do with surprises down the road.
I only had Matthew McConaughey and Powers Booth for a couple of weeks' time.
You take all of those ideas that you would love to do,
So then when I come off this, it's there.
and then you figure out what you can do.
You the agent in charge of the God's Hand case?
The movie opens with Matthew McConaughey going in to tell Powers Booth, who is an FBI director in Dallas, Texas, this fantastical story that the serial killer that the FBI have been looking for 2 years is in fact his brother.
Have you got any physical proof?
I got a pretty good idea where the rest of them bodies are.
The Rose Garden.
They're led on this Gothic biblical journey. To me, there's a lot of Poe in this story. It's like Edgar Allan Poe retelling The Prodigal Son, and the Rose Garden is kind of where it all happens.
It owes a lot to some of the masters of horror like Alfred Hitchcock and Robert Aldrich. These were the movies that inspired me.
I'd always been kind of fascinated with the idea of religious fanatics. As you know, I come from Dallas, Texas, and to a large degree that is like the buckle of the Bible Belt.
The scene that we're talking about is actually the narrative journey through the entire movie.
This scene is pivotal to the movie because this is the scene that takes us on this journey into the night. And we're going to get to this destination, to this rose garden, where supposedly these bodies are buried, but we're not sure. And
I'm gonna go show him where the bodies are, but things aren't necessarily adding up.
Matthew's a kind of a mystery character, and Powers Booth is this FBI guy who's trying to get to the bottom of this and find out if this guy's really telling the truth, or what does he really know about this serial killer. You know that there's something going on. I mean, it's a movie, it's a story. You know, you're trying to guess what's going to happen.
Which is a nice spot in the movie, and also a spot where literally in the film you found out enough information to get intrigued, but you don't have the answers yet.
We shot it in such a way that we really put the audience there in the car with these two actors, and they're taking this ride.
These scenes are in the present, but at the same time, you're constantly aware of the past because he's telling the story of the past. And within this car ride, we're revealed the entire story.
And when we get to the Rose Garden, we're going to find out what is what.
If the audience is not with me or specifically with us, at this point, I don't think you have a movie.
In this scene from Frailty, Fenton Meeks and Agent Doyle drive through a storm in East Texas to the Rose Garden. Over the course of the drive, Meeks reveals the harrowing story of his childhood.
I just can't imagine how you keep something like that inside for so long.
In staging the drive to the Rose Garden, the challenge for the production team was to create a sense of dramatic tension in a confined space, while setting the stage for the climax of the film.
Well, the feeling that I was after was one in which you see them for part of the time and part of the time you don't. Sometimes a very strong light through a grill coming across the face would accent the drama of the scene.
I only had Matthew McConaughey and Powers Booth for a couple of weeks' time. I wanted to maximize the drama of this drive. And so I thought, what do I need in this scene? I need them, I need them. I don't necessarily need the second unit shot of the car going by in the rain.
The money that the people have to shoot the picture with weighs very heavily on your shoulders if you're a photographer. So, in truth, you take all of those ideas that you would love to do, and then you figure out what you can do.
So we came to shoot this sequence, and he said, well, you know, we can just shoot the whole thing with a poor man's process.
The term poor man's process when shooting a car simply means the car doesn't move. And when you're moving in a car and you're going under street lights, the lighting changes on the face, it moves. So if you can't move the car, then you have to move the lights.
Bill Butler's poor man's process involved 20 crew members and 16 different effects.
Bill Butler said, oh yeah, let's do the old mag flashlight gag. And he took 2 mag flashlights, put them on a stick, tied them with a piece of black tape, and put a guy in all black behind the car as they were filming it. And that guy kind of walked around and walked off. And when you see the footage, you totally believe that there's a car behind this.
It sounds really simple, but Bill Butler is a master. I've never seen it done so well. And it's totally convincing to me watching it, and I was there. He had so many gags working, so many light gags, and the rain helps a lot too.
We had to go to single shots on them pretty much because one person was clear in the back seat, one person in the front with a grill between. Very difficult to get an interesting shot of both of them at once. And so, pragmatically, we just shot them in singles. It certainly worked for the film doing it that way simply because you have 2 people that are in entirely different spaces in the story. And one in the front seat's theoretically an FBI man trying to find out what this is all about. The person in the back seat is leading him down a road, and the FBI man suspects that he's being led down a road, but he can't figure out just what it is.
You're hiding something from me.
You keep saying that. I don't know what you mean. What do you think I'm hiding?
I know. Why don't you just keep talking? Maybe I'll figure that out.
We purposely picked a car that had a grate in between the front and the back seat that was large enough so you could really see what was going on between the 2. But you also felt the kind of intense separation.
We had 2 cars, and for some reason, one of the cars had to go back to a shop or something. Suddenly, the car didn't have the grid. We had to cut our own grid pattern to put in front of the lights on Matthew. And this was after we'd been there like for 14 hours trying to get this last shot. God, I remember that being a very long day.
Shooting the car ride as a process shot provided the production team the chance to incorporate creative transitions as the story dissolves from the present to events of 1979.
The flashback structure was pretty well set in the script. The shot of the side window with Powers in the rain, that was shot for the flashback.
It's a profile shot of Powers, and the camera goes by him and goes into the window as you see the streaking droplets, and then it starts to go out of focus, and then as we come back out of that, we're really into the pixels of a TV screen. There's just something kind of beautiful about them. It was in the storyboard that way, but it didn't get communicated to the effects guy. So he had just a simple E fan, an E fan meaning an effects fan. And so we got there, and the guy's hitting the wind on there, and you know the droplets are just kind of going like this, and I'm like going, oh no, that's not what I had in mind.
And we ended up with air cannons that roar. It sounds like a jet engine running outside the door. We had to loop the whole scene.
Why you come see me sooner?
It's funny all the trouble we went to just to get the droplets of water to go back horizontally. You know, it sounds kind of like a trivial thing, but if the illusion's going to work the way you design it or the way you want it to work, everything has to be perfect.
The challenge of the scene in the car, of course, was to move many lights and give the illusion that the car itself was moving.
And cut. Good job, guys.
Then the rest of it just falls to the editor.
I think the great pleasure of me of cutting a scene like this is taking all these elements of total artifice and creating reality. The challenge for me as the editor was to tell the story and create as much suspense as I could without giving anything away.
I don't watch the news or read the newspapers.
Now, you just told me you read an article on it in the paper.
There's a lot of subtext in that scene that has to do with surprises down the road.
Well, nothing that we're saying is what we're really saying.
You know, you never did tell me why it is you keep just that one picture of your mother in your office.
My mother was murdered a couple of days after that picture was taken.
It's all very designed, like both of them. Even his responses are completely designed to make him think one thing, and he's telling him one thing to make him think one thing.
I know something about him that you don't know, I know.
Is that why you took this job?
It's a tricky thing. We're not giving anything away, but on repeat viewing, you'll see that we are.
Editing the scene called for a complex juggling of performance, lighting, and continuity to create suspense.
When we edit a scene like the scene in the car, we look at the dailies, screen the dailies, choose takes based on performance, but in a scene like this, you're dealing with the story you're telling first and foremost. Also, beautiful, beautiful images of lights and grids, and we have so many choices in a scene like this. You also want the light to match somewhat, so if the light is passing Power's booth and you want to cut to Matthew at that same moment so it looks seamless. Of course, every editor wants it to look seamless, but you also have to honor the drama.
I just can't imagine how you keep something like that inside for so long.
I guess I avoided it.
I think the plot significance of the car ride sequence is that there's one person who has been in control of this encounter early on in the film, and there's a very subtle shift in control in this scene.
So tell me something. Why didn't you come see me sooner?
You don't want to get on I-30 East up here.
Giving directions at that time. Again, I'm telling him where to go. I'm in the back with handcuffs. I'm his prisoner, but yet there is a power shift there.
So I looked at the dailies and I said, wow, that shot of Fenton behind the grid that divides the front of the car with the back, it's really great. And when do I go from looking at him through the grid to going beyond the grid and being in front of his face with only the silhouette of the grid hitting his face when the car passes? What's the point where we can free him from being the prisoner? You say, okay, when do you make that jump from the wide shot to the medium to the close-up? And in this case, I thought the looking at him through the grid had a certain extreme significance.
You don't want to get on I-30 East up here.
The driving scenes were shot in multiple takes at 9 different angles. This meant that there was a lot of freedom to make decisions in the edit.
The storyboards of this sequence are very rudimentary. They're two guys in a car, and they're talking a lot. We really shot the hell out of that car.
But with only 2 characters in the car and no establishing shots, generating tension was a challenge.
We have no shots of the car driving in the rain, no second unit exterior shots, no rear view mirror shots.
I wanted one shot that I just ran out of time to get, and that's the guys, you know, looking in the rear view mirror at the guy in the back seat, and it's just the eyes. But I didn't have time to get it, and I didn't need it. I just didn't need it.
Ultimately, the confines of a process stage allowed the team to reinforce the dramatic tension and isolation of the scene.
They're totally separated from the rest of the world. Nobody could hear them if they scream. I couldn't wait to put in the sound of the rain and the windshield wipers in the scene. It isolates them even more because it's basically sounds that are coming from outside the car. And inside the car, it's perfectly still and tense. I think that creating a stillness, creating suspense, not cutting on the line, not cutting back and forth like a ping pong game, but absorbing the reaction that each person has to what the other person is saying is something that one plays with in the editing room.
You know, you're pretty good at this. You ever think about becoming a cop?
Well, you know, when I was a kid.
Well, you got the instincts for it.
Yeah, I could always look at a scene like this and see so many other ways I would have done it. But, it could drive you crazy.
The scene culminates in the characters arriving at the Rose Garden, behind Fenton's childhood home. In this location, both the modern story and the flashbacks to 1979 come to their dramatic conclusions. The production design team had to find a way to create an environment where the past and present could overlap.
They get out of the car and they're in front of what used to be their old house. The first kind of gut-wrenching feeling is, oh my God, the house is gone, and all there are ruins. There's vines growing up over the foundation and the rocks.
What happened to the house?
I burned down about 10 years ago.
And then they go on this journey through the old rose garden. The rose garden scene present, which was the recreation of what's supposed to be a dilapidated rose garden, and to, I think, a lot of the viewers is probably the scariest, spookiest scene in the movie, to me has the most beauty.
At night, the place was always a spooky place. I mean, these kids were burying dismembered bodies, so it's got to be a tad spooky. But going back, when you revisit it with the adult, it gives you quite a strange feeling.
Bill Paxton explained to me that he wanted this film to be much more in a Hitchcock feel or in a melodramatic mystery feel than in an out-and-out slaying movie.
The idea of American Gothic, I think it's the idea of horror going on in kind of idyllic suburban locations. To me, it's the idea that underneath there's something very dark and disturbing going on.
Part of the design of this came from the psychological journey that you're being taken through rather than actually stepping through this old garden.
In contrast to the claustrophobic space of the car, the Rose Garden is shot as a vast expanse. Creating a dramatic atmosphere was a consideration in both dressing and filming the set.
We dressed the entire area, the paths, with overgrown roses and weeds and twigs and vines and things like that. And we actually made, of course, the grave sites.
The technique that we used in the Rose Garden was to lay small pipes along the ground that had small holes in them. And if you push water under pressure through pipes like that, it turns into a mist. And rather than using smoke, you create your own fog, as it were. And so by doing that extensively in those scenes, we created a fog throughout the Rose Garden.
During the film, the Rose Garden transforms from a playground to a burial ground. To capture the different moods, the look of the garden had to be subtly degraded.
And if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on it. Ouch. Sit on
We made the first Rose Garden look bright and cheerful and sunny and young children running through it. The last Rose Garden that you come through, and you come through it at night, it's in the moonlight, you barely see it. You've created a fog, which makes it even more mysterious and more dramatic. And you light that in a way to accent that feeling.
The Rose Garden past and present were actually filmed at two different locations. The Rose Garden 1979 was actually at Huntington Gardens in Pasadena. One was a pristine garden that we couldn't make look old because we would have ruined what was there, so it was easier to take an empty space and recreate a new garden in what would look like a dilapidated state. It was raw dirt land in Malibu.
The Rose Garden came from my childhood. My grandpa was from Tyler, Texas, where the big Rose Garden is. But we weren't able to use Tyler. I think they were scared that they'd think, people were burying bodies in their garden.
At the climax of the scene, the contemporary story and flashbacks overlap in a single moment. The production team had to represent a collision of the past and present.
Bill Paxton came up with the idea to, in one scene, walk them through this old rose garden and then find a crumbled piece of pottery, I think it was an angel's head, on the ground. And when you come up, the camera would then move up off of that, and you were then taken back to 1979.
Well, what I'll do is, while we're down there, I'll hear them tromp off, and then over that I'll start hearing digging.
Right.
And then as we come up, we'll see it, huh? Yeah.
And weeping and sobbing and stuff.
Oh, God. Heartbreaking stuff.
We just dropped the crane down, park it on a rock, and put the kids out there and started the camera again and brought it up, and you take out a few middle frames. But it was a great shot, and it's one of these devices that you just have to think of it. It's the kind of thing you can do at home with your home video, you know, but it was a terrific effect.
That's big movie making, you know. I mean, you pull off a gag like that and you've got something great, you know.
That sequence suggests that the past and the present have merged, that we're in a place where the past is so potent that nothing one could do in the present could rid this location for what happened there 20 years before.
That was all done in one scene. So at the same time, we had to dress and light the front of that scene as if it were present day, dilapidated, a little gothic. And then at the same time, in the background, light it completely different for 1979. That's one of the scenes in the movie where you really kind of take a deep breath. You know, you see this going on, and because it's one fluid movement, I think the impact was much greater than if he would have done a cut.
Well, the timing was perfect because I like hearing his line before we come to it. I love the illusion of filmmaking. I love the simple illusion that we were able to create of this drive.
We wanted to create a feeling of being led along this path without knowing what's going to happen next. I saw the two stories running side by side, the modern story and the 1979 story. Two trains leaving the station. One train is moving faster with a lot more events, a lot more changes of scene. The other train is sitting at the station for a while, picking up steam very slowly. And there's going to be only two stops. One is the car, and the next one is the rose garden.
I think that journey or scene is very Hitchcock-like. It kind of mesmerizes you in the same way that a Hitchcock scene would.
It's a tragic story of the disintegration of a family. It's about the frailty of perception, the frailty of sanity.
Is Dad mad? Is Dad right? Are these people guilty? Are they innocent? Or are they really bad people?
The most horrific idea about religious fanaticism, I thought, was that what if it was true?
Press Conference, a series in which personalities who make the news answer impromptu questions from men who write the news. The questioners tonight are John Bevan of the Manchester Guardian, Elizabeth Frank of the News Chronicle, Rennie McCall of the Daily Express, and William Hardcastle of the Daily Mail, who begins the programme.
Good evening. It's very good of Orson Welles to have come along all the way from Paris in this weather to be with us tonight. He really needs very little introduction from me, I'm sure. There he is, 6 foot 3 inches tall, 39 years old, but still I feel, for most of us, the boy wonder of show business. You pays your money and you takes your choice. Orson Welles the actor, Citizen Kane, Harry Lime. Orson Welles the producer, the director, the man who made the film of Macbeth in 21 days, I think. The man who went all the way to Haiti in the Caribbean and produced King Lear with an all-Negro cast. Long before flying saucers were ever heard of, Orson Welles did a broadcast that frightened the daylights out of the whole population of New York with a too realistic version of An Invasion from Mars. Yes, he's a man of parts, a man who's at the age of 16 starred at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. He last year, I believe, he wrote a ballet. He used to write his own newspaper column. He, I believe now, is writing a book on international organizations. He has even been a magician, and at that time, as I recall, he sawed Marlene Dietrich in half. A man of parts, a man of many parts, and he's come along tonight for us to throw any questions we like at him. So I'll start and ask him, especially in view of the fact, Orson Welles, that this is, I think, virtually your first appearance on television. Why have you, as it were, avoided television when, in fact, you've seized every other medium? Doesn't television attract you?
Oh, enormously, Mr. Hardcastle. I suppose it's just a question of terror. simply frightened of television.
What do you think of television as an art form? Can it ever be really good like the cinema?
Oh, I think so. I think it is. I think it is already very good. I think it's certainly as interesting as the cinema is today.
How's it going to develop, do you think?
Well, I think that we're going to find new forms in television. I think we're going to return to old forms, too, to the storyteller. I do feel that the television is going up a blind alley when it makes imitation movies.
And Mr. Wells, talking of terror, I always think that perhaps the highlight of your very amusing and exciting life was that time you really frightened half of the United States out of their wits back there in the 1930s with your tremendous broadcast, pretending that Mars was invading the world. Which
What
was
do you
in a
mean
kind of a
pretending, Mr. McCall, really? Haven't you heard about the flying saucers?
Indeed, yes indeed. Well, do you look back on that with a certain amount of pleasure?
Well, I look back on it with a certain amount of wonder, because we never imagined when we did the show that as many people would be as excited as they were. We thought a few people on the lunatic fringe might be vaguely disturbed by these rumors, which we broadcast, but it turned out to be
more people on the fringe than you thought.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think it was. I think we underrated the prestige of radio at that moment. Anything that was said on the radio was automatically true. After that, nobody ever believed anything on the radio. And on Pearl Harbor, the day of Pearl Harbor in America, I was doing a broadcast which was interrupted with the announcement that Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and of course everybody in America said it's rather bad taste to do it again.
Was it that particular aspect of reality that terrifies you in appearing in television? Is it because you feel of its immediate effect?
Partly that, and partly not knowing it. You know, it's a medium that I don't know except as a viewer. I did King Lear in New York last year, and that was my first experience, but I was well protected with a beard and sustained by some pretty wonderful blank verse.
What kind of things do you like best as a viewer? Do you like plays or these conversations?
I like conversations, documentaries, sport events. I like real things and stories and conversations rather than plays. I don't say that plays haven't a place, but I do feel that the further they move from films and the closer they come to the needs of this medium, the more interesting they are.
But, Mr. Wells, once you were quoted as saying that you'd do Hamlet hanging from a trapeze if it got publicity for what you were doing. Now, here is television, waiting. Was it, in fact,
May I correct that quotation, Mr. Hardcastle? I said simply that I thought there were 1,000 ways of doing any great classic, and I was defending myself against some interpretation of some classic which we'd produced, and I said that if it would be effective, I would certainly do Hamlet on a trapeze.
Arising out of that, Mr.
Not
Wells,
for publicity.
I saw that film you made of Macbeth. As a Scot, I was immensely interested by it. It had some of the weirdest kind of trappings I've ever seen in my life. Now, could you tell me, why did you select those costumes? Why did you film it that particular way? Was it to try and get a bang out of it, to put it across?
Well, everyone has asked me that, and I don't know what people wore in Scotland in the 11th century that was so much more civilized than that. In fact, they seem to have been barefoot when they went to battle occasionally in the Highlands and stripped to the way. And we were, I beg your pardon,
I love.
Yes, a country I love too. But I believe that the costumes were on the savage side historically, and that the tradition of dignified plaits and all the rest of it dates with the 80s and the pictorial actor-manager Star Theatre in London. I don't think we were as wrong as that. I don't say we were right.
But do you think that Macbeth should be played with a Scottish accent, for example?
I think that these plays are so great that they can stand up no matter how badly we do them and how strangely we approach them.
How about that film you made of Othello? I don't think we've had an opportunity to see it.
You're going to in this winter, before the spring, yes.
Coming up. What's been holding it up so far?
Well, holding it up has been the American release. And frankly, I was rather anxious to have it in America before it was in England, because I'm terrified of what you think of it.
What have the critics said? What have the critics said about it in America? They attacked
you? They haven't seen it yet.
They haven't.
You see, I'm waiting for it to open in America before I sneak.
You think they would attack it less than the English?
I can only pray that everybody will attack it less than I fear.
Are the Americans kinder than the English in criticism?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Are they less distressed about the treatment of classics, possibly?
I don't think so. I don't think so, but I think they are very impressed by what you think about the treatment of a classic.
I'd like to ask you, Mr. Wells, about your film career, apart from your infinitely varied other show career. The thing that sticks in most people's minds, the personal creation, was Citizen Kane. Lately, you've had Othello held up. I think you have a Somerset Maugham film, 3 Cases of Murder.
I have a new film, too, which is going to be released very soon, of my own, that I wrote myself.
How do you look at your own film career? How do you feel about it, quite frankly?
Well, I don't know. I'm not very interesting on the subject, you know?
Well, we're always interested in people, and especially you tonight, and Citizen Kane stays in our minds so strongly.
It's terribly pompous sort of thing to say I know, but I am really only interested in what I'm going to do, and I find that I dislike rather intensely everything that I've completely finished.
Well, tell us about Mr. Arcadian, which is still being made, or just being
Well,
finished.
it's finished, you know. It's in that dangerous condition where in the morning I think it's splendid, in the evening I wonder.
What is it, a thriller?
A kind of sequel to Citizen Kane?
Not at all. No, it's quite a different story.
It has been said it was.
What is it, a kind of Thin Man stories?
It's a story about a high financier, a man of many countries and 3 passports. Not at all a press lord. You know.
Is it a political satire?
No. No, it's a tragedy, in a way, with melodramatic and comic decorations. It pretends to be a thriller, and it isn't. That rather sounds as though it isn't thrilling. I'm doing a very poor job on this picture. Please, let's change the subject.
Why did you make it in Spain, Mr. Wells?
Only the scenes that take place in Spain.
I see. Not
he has
because
a castle
got
in Spain.
No particular sympathy for the Franco regime or anything like
There's
that.
no political question in the picture. He's a man who has a castle in Spain and also a house in Germany, and we have scenes in Germany.
But on the whole,
we won't
Mr.
talk
Wells,
about rearming the Germans.
In the last few years, you have been making your base more or less in Europe.
Yes.
Have you not?
Yes.
Is there any particular reason for that? I mean, there's probably a very practical one, but...
Well, I think if you stop and think about it, a great many of us have been in Europe during these last years because it's been a kind of frontier for us in films. We moved west and now we're coming back again. It's less organized, more anarchistic and freer atmosphere because it isn't organized on an industrial basis. I'm speaking of continental film.
Even in Franco's Spain, I mean, it's more...
Well, we were a location.
I see.
We were on location in Spain, you know.
You came over here a little while ago just for one day to do a shot in Moby Dick.
Yes.
And then you were quoted as saying, probably incorrectly, that your £2,000 a day was your absolute minimum.
Well, I got more than 2,000, and I will take less.